May 12th, we have got a great show for you today. We're going to talk about voting, we're going to talk about marriage, all kinds of things. But let me start out today with telling you something that I've learned. You know, John, yesterday, John McKay, I told folks that I broke my arm over the weekend. Yeah, Saturday night in an elevator. People laugh because they're thinking, an elevator in the Tri-Cities, where's that? No, it was in a Bellevue hotel. But I fell in the elevator and I broke my humerus bone, which is not funny at all, right below the shoulder. So I went to the doctor this morning so I could get what is my treatment going to be, and I really feared surgery. I was really concerned about that, really wanted to avoid surgery. And guess what the good news is?
You don't have to go into the Exacto.
Woohoo! Yes. So it's going to be on the Heal Naturally course. They really talked to me a lot about you can't fall again. You can't do it again. You can't fall again because then that will really screw things up. So I'm going to have to work on that. Now, what have I learned? What have I learned? You know, I can't write. I can't use my right hand, which is my dominant hand.
Mm-hmm.
So I am learning a lot of things about how to get dressed, how to eat. Today, I was able to put in one contact by myself, but I could not get the other one in. So I have a friend staying with me. She lives in Yakima, and she's come up here for a couple of days to hang out with me. I call her my health advocate, and thank goodness, because she was able to put in the other contact. So.
And you learn probably the first try or two on the contacts, you learn exactly how firmly to, because I wear them when I'm not wearing these Coke bottles, you learn very quickly how hard or not hard to put the lens in.
Yes, yes. Lots of learning to be done. And interestingly, at the doctor's office today, it's an orthopedic, so all these people were in there with their slings and their legs. I mean, it's all the bone problems. So I felt in good company, but I knew what people there were going through.
Milk, lots of milk.
Is that it? I better work on that. All right, today, you know, this week is filing week. If you want to run for public office, this is the week that you're going to sign up at your county auditor's office at the election section of the office. So we're going to be talking, while people are thinking about offices and all that, we're going to talk about registering to vote and the whole issue of voting, because very sadly, as a democracy, we're losing steam when it comes to people voting. So we're going to see if we can turn that around, give people some new ideas about why they want to participate, and really share with people how incredibly crazy easy it is to register to vote.
Well, I've always said, if you don't vote, you can't complain.
Yes,
I'm rather opinionated. My wife will tell you that.
So you always vote, because you get to talk. All right. Yeah, me too. Let me remind you of our phone number. It is 509-547-8726. And of course, like always, we want to add you to the conversation. The other big topic we're going to talk about today is marriage counseling, or just plain the state of marriage. And let me share some stats with you first off, so you can kind of get in the groove about why would I even want to bring this subject up? Well, I'm concerned about marriage. I think marriage is a good thing. I don't care about the combination of people. I am an advocate of love, and I think that whatever people's combos, I don't care. But marriage itself is really going through some tough time. People are getting married later in life. The average age now, the median age for men is 28.3. For women, it's 25.8. Marriage rate continues to decline in the United States. In fact, there's been a decline of over 50% from 1970 to 2010. Ooh, ouch! Percentage of married individuals over the age of 18 who respond that their marriages are very happy has gradually declined over the last 4 decades. Another bad indicator. The rate of satisfaction in marriage is higher for people when both of the partners are religious and attend religious, church and that sort of thing, have religion in their life. So I thought that was interesting. We'll have a chance to maybe talk about some of these other stats, but I pulled these stats off the internet, and they're just the kind of thing that Kathleen Lawrence can talk about so freely. Kat, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's good to be here. And it's nice. I want to congratulate you on the show also.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Kat has a counseling service in the Richland area. And, what's really kind of fun for us today is that she's had a history of doing talk radio before, like in the Seattle area. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. So she knows how this works. She can help us out. And the other great thing is that during our conversation today, I really wanted to hear a lot of examples. And you were telling me that much of your practice over your years has been done in the Seattle area. So you can share some cases with us without names, but nobody's going to be able to say, oh, hey, that's my neighbor.
Right.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of confidentiality, that's very, very, very important. So even the cases that I use from my Seattle practice, I actually, when I knew I was going to be on the show, I called people over the weekend for, can I use, if this comes up, can I use this, can I use that, and ask their permission. So that even though they're across the mountains, I know that it's okay to share stories from
Good.
relationships.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I like how you prepare. Well, let's just jump right into it. And I want you to, from your experience, what do you think are the common problems that people get into with marriage?
I think the most common one is communication, and the second most common one is communication, and the third most common is communication.
You hit the nail on the head because my wife will remind you about that. I've been married about 21 years. But yeah, if you don't communicate and talk, you're toast.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And it's not just whether or not you communicate and talk, but it's part of communication is that listening part. And the third part of communication is what we perceive, the meaning that we make out of what we've heard. And it's amazing with couples how different what I said is perceived by my husband.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and then you put 10 years of sort of miscommunication, and when people get into crisis, then I would imagine that's when they come to you.
Exactly. I think the probably one of the things that I wish the very most is that couples would come in earlier when it's just kind of troubles and we're struggling a little bit, but it's not a crisis problem and it's not something that has been embedded in the relationship for 20 years. By that time, which is usually when couples come in, you've got something that's really an ingrained pattern, and it's so hard to change. You think about just the lack of awareness. We get into patterns with each other when we're in couples that after a while it's kind of like walking. You don't think about putting one foot in front of the other, you just go, and it becomes that unconscious part of walking through your marriage. And some of those patterns or those behaviors become outdated. And then they start not only not being functional in the relationship, but they're really causing problems in the relationship.
So, how can you change those patterns? I mean, do you have to, really commit to it? I mean, do you have to say, this is a process I want to go through?
Yes. In that, when I have couples that come in, usually there's one, at least one, maybe both, that are on their way out the door. They're pretty done with the relationship, but they're kind of giving it one, okay, I agreed as the last ditch effort that I would go to couples therapy, so here I am. So in the process, when I start working with couples, it's that this is not going to be a happy process. It's not fun necessarily. It's not happy in the beginning, but if you commit to it, and I do ask for 100% commitment, for 90 days. I give it a time limit, because for some people to ask them for an unstated, unending commitment is way too much. They're not prepared to do that. So usually what I'll do is ask them for a 90-day, 100% commitment that they're going to do the work to see how much they can change the relationship, how much they're willing to learn about themselves and their own behavior. The second thing about it is, if you commit to it, no matter what happens with the relationship, my experience is that as individuals, you're going to come out better.
So regardless of whether or not you actually even stay together, you will have learned some things that are helpful to you.
Exactly.
And let me remind you that our phone number, 547-8726, if you want to join in our conversation, or if you have a question that you want to ask Kat, you can do that as well. Well, I'm going to imagine that that people decide they're going to end their relationship by coming to counseling.
Sometimes that happens in the process of it. That's
Mhm.
exactly what they decide. At that point, in my practice, what I do is there are two ways to end a relationship. There's the unpleasant, let's all go get our lawyers and have a big fight, or there's the let's go through this and sanely work out how do we live from here? What do we need to do? And of course, there's all the considerations in the relationship. Are there children? What are the ages of the children?
Mm-hmm.
All of that, and can we work that out in counseling? So in essence, what you would do is take all the stuff you've already worked out, take that to the lawyer and say, write this up on a legal piece of paper and we're done. I usually also like to include a ritual with that that's more of an emotional ritual about uncoupling.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. We're going to take a break here, but what we want to do when we come back is learn more about exactly what happens during counseling. What can I expect? I mean, do I have to do emotional exercises, or what is it? You're listening to News Talk 870. This is Meet in the Middle. I'm Christine Brown. We're on News Talk 870. My guest today is Kathleen Lawrence. We're talking about marriage counseling. She's been a marriage counselor for several decades. Would it be a couple of decades or so?
No, this is my third career.
Oh, okay, so you bring some other experience to the table as well. There's a lot of mystique. There's a lot of unknown about what goes on during marriage counseling. So tell us, what goes on?
So usually, as we were talking about earlier, couples come in and they're kind of in crisis, or they're about done with the relationship. Couples counseling ends up being kind of a last-ditch effort. So when people come into session, the first thing that's important for me is who are you? And where are you coming from, both in life, and what's your history, what's your background. The last thing that people want to hear is that I'm going to ask them about their childhood, and the reality is I'm going to ask you about your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Because family of origin is really important. You know, we form most of our belief systems between 0 and 5 years old. And then we carry those beliefs on with us into adulthood. We might refine them, update them, but our basic belief systems are formed in that family of origin. So how you approach marriage, how you approach being a couple is also going to be based a lot in those formative years.
Mm-hmm.
So I do ask about history, and in the process of that, there's usually some highlights when I hear from each party. There are usually some highlights, some commonalities, some understandings to me about how these two people came together. So I will highlight those and then ask the couple to talk about those. Many times they've forgotten them, or again, it's like that part that's gone unconscious, they didn't even remember that. Or it reawakens something within them about, this is how we came together. This is one of the things that I appreciated about you when we came together. So history is really important. And usually give me a synopsis about what's going on currently, so that I know kind of what we're working with or what we've got going on. So I'll do that, and then I talk a lot in first session about what couples work is about. I do let people know this may not be fun. It will be hard, because I also let them know that I'm not a passive therapist, because I think some people need to know that I'm pretty confrontive, and it's like, you didn't come here because you wanted to spend the next 5 years of your life here. So let's dig in and get the work done, so that you could be on your way.
Well, people are going to learn a lot of things that they wouldn't have known before. Maybe their partner didn't tell them, but in this setting, they're going to maybe be open, and ooh, that can be harsh.
It can be really hard, and that's exactly it, because it's the vulnerability, especially when couples have distanced from each other. there's this walling off. There's not any sharing or not any vulnerability within the couple at that point. So it's also teaching them that you can be vulnerable with this other person in here and be safe. That there are boundaries that will be set here. We'll speak to each other respectfully here. It's okay to have anger. It's okay to talk about things that make you angry, or even to be angry with the other partner. But in here, we're going to deal with that respectfully.
So from gathering the history and all, do you kind of come up with a diagnosis or a kind of a plan of action? I'm going to work with each person on this individually, and then together they're going to do that?
It's interesting, and you bring up a really good aspect of it, because as far as diagnosis go, if I'm doing couples therapy, I don't necessarily need to have a diagnosis other than this couple is struggling.
Mhm.
There's actually a diagnostic code for that in the manual. However, in the process of talking with people frequently, I will find something that's actually a diagnosable condition, and that's really what's interfering in the relationship, is that there is some kind of adjustment disorder or depression, anxiety. Anxiety and depression probably are the two biggest that can really affect relationships and the quality of your marriage or your
Mhm.
relationship. So there may be that I find that in the process of that talking that initially happens. And then that obviously is something that becomes very central to how I deal with the couple. Sometimes the couple is really healthy. They need some new skills or some new ways to communicate, some new ways to talk to each other. Effective listening comes in every time very quickly, because Harvard actually did a study on this years ago, and what they found was when it came to listening, we listen to about the first 8 words before we are already preparing our response to the other
Yes.
person.
Ooh, yeah.
So I teach people how to actually listen to what your partner says, suspending your response. Put that in the back of your mind and trust it'll be there. What you need to say will be there. But for right now, just hear what they say.
Listen to what they say. Give us an example of one of your interesting cases.
So as far as the listening aspect, I actually have some exercises that I use in therapy, and it's active listening. So I set it up where one partner is going to talk to the other one. There's the listener and there's the talker.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then how I set it up is that the listener will listen for a few sentences and then put their hand up so that they can reflect back to the talker, not parrot, not repeat it, but reflect back what they heard to see if they actually understood it, because that's where a couple really begins to see where trouble is in their own relationship and their own communication. So I was dealing with one couple with this, and she would start talking, and she's rapid fire, and she's talking hard and fast, and here she goes, blah, 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 and I'm finding myself getting nervous, like there's no way he's going to get all this, and he's not putting his hand up. So finally I did. Whoa. And then I said, I don't know how you would have gotten all of that, but can you kind of tell her what you got out of that?
Mm-hmm.
And he looked absolutely glazed-eyed at me, and he said, I don't even know where to start. And it was like that right there. I said, now look what happens when you get home, or when you're at home. You get she talks, you get glazed-eyed, and it all goes away, and then she comes back and says, you don't listen to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and fights on. And the reality is, you've lost all the stuff that you've heard. So we're going to practice this. And for him, the hardest thing was for him to put his hand up after 2 or 3 sentences, because he kept saying, it's so rude. That's so rude to interrupt her.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, it's probably harder on her when she goes on for 15 minutes and you can't remember a word she said.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, so that got them started in that. What about another example? Because that's a light bulb there.
Right, and that's usually what therapy is about light bulbs.
Mm-hmm.
Because the more light bulbs that go on, the easier it is for couples to begin to see. And all of a sudden then, that's how you get invested in it. If you're a party to it, is when you start having light bulbs come on and you say, aha, now this made that session worth it. There are other times when I had a case again very recently where one of the part of the couple asked me a question about them, about, do you think that and basically it was, do you think that I whine when I talk?
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
And so I looked back and I said, so do you want me to answer that? Or is this something that you're asking because you want reassurance that you're not?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, no, I want an honest answer because my husband says I'm the whiniest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I wouldn't say that. I said, however, I do experience that when you're talking, that you will slide into a whine and a complain, and your voice actually changes. I said, your facial features contort. And I said, what I suggest is that you go home and look at yourself, do it and talk about something real in front of the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And notice your voice changing and your facial features and how your face scrunches up. And she was horrified.
But again,
Wow.
very helpful.
Yeah,
You know, if she
because
did it.
she did do it, and she said, oh my God, now I realize what it is that he sees, and the minute that he sees that look on my face, he just wants to run.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, it's hard.
All right. What about, do you give assignments for the in-between time of sessions?
I usually do skill-based assignments or skill-based learning in session that they can then take home. So one of my earlier ones is called HALT. I like acronyms. It's probably, my husband is ex-Army and we're very involved with military, so it's probably where it came from. But the first one I use is HALT, H-A-L-T, and what it is I will not get into a serious conversation with my spouse when I'm hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Okay.
Because those are the four things that will almost ensure this is not going to go well.
What are they again?
Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Okay. All right.
And
those are good to remember.
yeah, it's really great to remember that this is a time when I'm hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. I'm not going to talk about the bills that are due and how are we going to pay them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to talk about if I'm hungry. Some people get really hungry and they're shaky and it's just, I got to get some food.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not the time to discuss your husband's worst habits or how he's left the laundry on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So things like that. So when you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, keep it light.
Okay, good advice. You know, I want to talk, when we come back, we're going to look at some of the practical aspects of marriage counseling. First of all, you might be saying to yourself right now, I really need that, but can I afford that? How can I get that? We're going to look at some answers to those questions coming up next.
So insurance companies are much more frequently accepting couples counseling and covering it. Some of them don't. If they don't, I actually have two rates. I have one, an insured rate, and two, one that is not where you don't have it insured or covered under insurance. So, and that's a commitment on my part from the standpoint of community and wanting community to be healthy. So I work that in when I can. Always check with your insurance company 100% of the time. Some insurance policies have got limits on how many sessions, others don't. Some will only cover a certain percentage of it, others will cover it the same way they do everything else. So whenever you're thinking about going into couples counseling, make sure and check with your own insurance company and find out what do they cover.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that would be step number one.
Right.
Go check my insurance. And another way to look at it, I'm guessing, is that you could pay out of your pocket and potentially save your marriage, or you could pay in a different way if your marriage dissolves and you didn't give it everything you could.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Attorneys and legal work is expensive.
Yes, it is. And just that, yeah, it's heartbreaking for people to
Yeah.
split up anyway.
And the emotional cost of
Yes.
it. Because the other thing about it is that frequently, after a divorce, people end up going to counseling anyway. Now they're dealing
Yes,
with
they
whatever
do.
it was that they didn't deal with before. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, see if you can work out or saving money somewhere along the line of that.
Well, that's another one of my thoughts. Do people come to marriage counseling alone? What if the other
Yes.
partner doesn't want to come?
Yeah, that's not that uncommon, and I do frequently have one partner or the other that will come in and talk about what's going on, and they say, you know, my partner didn't want to have anything to do with it, but I need to know what to do about this. What will usually happen in that case is that they want to give me an awful lot of information about the person that's not there.
Yeah.
And why this relationship is going bad because of the one that's not there. So what I'll do in that case is, you know, that person isn't here, so we really can't deal with their stuff. What I can deal with is your reactions, your responses, your thoughts and feelings about what's going on at
Mhm.
home. So let's look at that. What usually happens in those cases is that the one that's come in gets better. Then the one that hasn't been coming in now has more of a pull to go because they see their spouse doing better. And that's always attractive to all of us. I mean, all of us, and we want some.
Mm-hmm.
So then the other partner wants to come in. They can be sometimes very reluctant to come in because they think I've established a relationship with the one that's been coming. Therefore, my loyalty is with them,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to be able to see things from the aspect of the one that hasn't been there, which is not how therapists work.
You don't have any favorites?
I have lots of favorites. I really do, but not within the couple.
Not within. Uh-huh.
It's once they're both in there, then that's a couple. It's almost as if it's a different person than the one couple has been in. It's kind of like, you know, corporations are recognized legally as entities on their own. They're like people.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also individuals that have a life and have a personship. A couple does too. So when I get the couple in there, then I'm dealing with the couple, and that's a whole in itself.
Yes.
Being involved spiritually within your community, I think, is really important because, again, that's your couple support, and that's where you get that support. So having a spiritual community, also being involved in Lions, it's really interesting. I was actually born in Hollywood, California,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a Rotarian. So there's Lions and Rotarians going there. So having those communities are really important to coupleship, and like our caller was saying, that there's the place where you find role models. It's also the place where you find empathy. It's the place where you find like people who go through struggles, and you can exchange that with them. So having a strong support community, however you find that, is extremely important to coupleship, to individuals, to all of us.
Absolutely. Well, we've just barely touched the surface on this whole idea of marriage counseling, but I guess the takeaway today is that when you first think in your marriage that maybe something down the road might turn into a big problem, seek out help at that point versus the crisis point. I guess that's one of the big takeaways I'm
Exactly.
hearing from you today.
Yeah, it's when you find yourself in resentment about something, when you find yourself distancing from your partner, not wanting to be as close, wanting to avoid, not wanting to talk about things that you know are the important things that you need to talk about. That's the time to come in.
Yeah, and check it out. All right. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us. It was great, and we enjoyed the call from Des as well. And we're going to take a break right here, but you know, we're going to talk about registering to vote with Marilyn Perkins. She's from the League of Women Voters, and she's got a lot of good information that's going to make you want to rush out and register if you are not. Stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. News Talk 870. We're switching gears now. We're going to talk about registering to vote. And it seemed to me like a good time to talk about this because we've got people gearing up for an election. This is filing week, so we've got people going to county courthouses and, signing up that they want to run maybe for a city council position or school board. There are a number of other races as well. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to do that. You can't even run for an office unless you're registered to vote, so that would be step number one. My guest today is Marilyn Perkins. She's with the League of Women Voters, and you know what's incredible? Well, first of all, she's been involved in the League for 36 years, you told me the other day, Marilyn. Is that right?
That's right.
And we've been doing, you and I, we go back for, a lot of years, at least a decade, doing a lot of voter registration stuff. We do that at KNDU because it's just so important that people get registered to vote and act out this thing called democracy. What's wrong with us, though, right now, Marilyn?
I don't know.
50% turnout in the last election. What's going on?
I think there are lots of excuses, and really that's all they are excuses. We're very lucky to live in a state that makes voting very easy. It's pretty easy to register. It's easy to vote in that you get your ballot in the mail, and you just need to hand deliver it or get it postmarked by election day. And most of us could do that. We are a very fluid nation in that people are moving a lot, and I know sometimes that can interfere with having a current address and being able to vote. But even that can be overcome with a little planning and forethought, and everybody, and especially young people, you're very underrepresented in the voting. And people over 65 are the largest voting bloc. And so I don't know that every 18-year-old or 24-year-old would agree with their grandparents on every issue, but they're letting their grandparents decide a lot of things for them.
Yeah, they are. They are. And I know that there are a lot of different groups. I know the League has been extremely involved over the years in trying to get interest for people to register to vote. It seems that more attention is drawn when there's a presidential election, but when there are these smaller elections, there's not as much interest. And you know what Oregon did? We were talking about this the other day, and that Oregon set it up so that when you sign up to get a driver's license, you also register to vote at that time. Would that be something that you think would help in Washington as well?
Well, you can get your voter registration done when you get your license, and sometimes you're not 18 when you get your license. You have to be 18 to vote, and so there's a 5-year gap in there. You have to be 18 by the next election to be able to register.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want people on the rolls that aren't able to register or aren't able to vote. So it does take a little bit of planning, but again, you can do it online in our state. If you do have a driver's license, you can go online and register to vote, and they will use your signature on your driver's license to match against the ballot you send in.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a secret ballot. You put your ballot in a separate envelope inside the mailing envelope, and they check the mailing envelope for your signature, and then that other envelope gets pulled out and put with all the other ballots. Nobody looks at it at that point. And so people don't have to worry about that. You can print the application from the internet and mail it in, or you can go to any of the auditor offices in the Tri-Cities. There's one in Richland by Fred Meyer. There's one on Canal Drive in Kennewick. You can obviously go to the auditor's office in Prosser or in Pasco. And they're very, very willing to help you, very friendly. If you have any questions, if you aren't sure, if you've gotten married and divorced and changed your names 2 or 3 times, they will help you to get everything straightened out.
Mm-hmm.
Same place you go to get your vehicle tabs, so
Right.
there you go, get signed up.
No, I agree. And there's a site at the Secretary of State called myvote.wa.gov where a person can go and check their status. They can see where they are, if they are registered, but they're not sure. Some people move a lot. They can check what the last address is. If they need to change their address, they can do that. Because if you're not living at your address, they will not deliver the ballot or forward it.
I see.
So you need to make sure that address is up to date. Whenever you move, like all the other things you change, your address, you have to be sure and get that ballot information changed.
Here's our phone number. It's 509-547-8726. I would be curious to know why some of our listeners might not be registered or don't vote. So I would be curious to hear that. Give us a call and tell us. Do you think it would help, Marilyn, if we had voting day as a national holiday like they do in some countries?
Yes. Apparently there's a TED talk out there by why we vote on Tuesdays, and I didn't have the time to look at it. But most countries either vote on the weekend or they make it a national holiday for the big elections. And a lot of people are working and sometimes working long hours, and especially in states where they have to get to the polls. We don't have that excuse in Washington. So you get your ballot almost 2.5 weeks before the election. That gives you plenty of time to look at it. If you aren't sure, you can do a little research, ask your friends if they know about the candidates. And it takes a lot of effort to run for office. Even at school board or city council, it's a big commitment of time. And I think the people running deserve our attention and willingness to at least be a slightly informed voter.
Mm-hmm. I think that may be one of the things that keeps people away from it, is because they don't feel like they know enough to vote. And many of the referendums that we've had or initiatives, they really do. There is an expectation that you need to learn something about it to determine how you feel about it to select your decision.
It can be intimidating. People are afraid of voting for the wrong person or on the wrong side of an issue, and sometimes the issues can be stated in a confusing manner. So it takes a little bit of research, but it's out there. It doesn't take a lot, and you can go online and read editorials. There are other sites that try and provide a balanced presentation. The League of Women Voters has a site called Vote 411 that has information on the candidates where they answer questions, and information on both sides of issues that people can read about. And it's a good resource for voters. There are other resources out there. I support, local newspapers. I think we're used to getting things for free, and sometimes we have to pay a little bit to get some information.
Mm-hmm. Well, what are the basic requirements to register to vote? Now, you have to be a U.S. citizen, correct?
And 18.
And 18.
And that's it.
That's it. I don't have to prove that I live on 38th Avenue or wherever.
No, it's a pretty trusting system, but it is illegal to falsify information. It is a crime, so you do not want to do that. You want to take this seriously and give the correct information, keep it up to date as best you can. If you have some kind of handicap that keeps you from writing, like if you couldn't sign your name, Christine, you could have two people witness your ballot. You could probably scratch in the places you wanted to vote, and people could witness that you weren't able to sign your name.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, Marilyn Perkins with League of Women Voters, that's a lot of good information. Folks, if you have trouble registering to vote and you just don't know what to do, you call me. Call me. Look us up here at Town Square Media, and I will help you. I will get Marilyn to help you. Someone will help you. I want you to register that much. So, we've got a final break now here, John, don't we? Yeah. And then we'll wrap things up. We'll tell you what's on tap for tomorrow. So come on back to News Talk 870. Hey, it's May 12th, and we're wrapping up another edition here of Meet in the Middle. What are we going to talk about tomorrow? Well, we're going to talk about wine. Yeah, I've invited two guests, Andy Perdue and Eric Degerman. They are very involved in basically reporting about wine all over the Northwest. They do a great job. And, you may read some of their stories in the Seattle Times or the Tri-City Herald. They have quite a publication background, so they're in the know. We're going to get that information from them. We're also going to be talking about Food Truck Friday and all of the many events that are happening out of the Pasco Food Specialty Kitchen. Yeah, that is a great program. Learn more about what kinds of requirements food trucks go through. So, had a good time today? Why don't we do it again tomorrow at noon?